the thing that you're doing, the thing that we're doing now is saying, oh, wait a minute, it's time to retrieve the human values, the natural values, the female values, the indigenous values that we forcibly repressed in order to build this scientific, mechanized, technologized horror show that we're living in.
Named one of the world's 10 most influential intellectuals by MIT, Douglas Rushkoff is an author and documentarian who studies human autonomy in a digital age. His 20 books include the just-published Team Human, based on his podcast, as well as bestsellers Present Shock, Throwing Rocks at the Google Bus, Program or Be Programmed, and Life, Inc. He has also made PBS Frontline documentaries, including Generation Like, The Persuaders, and Merchants of Cool. Rushkoff's work explores how different technological environments change our relationship to narrative, money, power, and one another. He coined such concepts as viral media, screenagers, and social currency, and has been a leading voice for applying digital media towards social and economic justice. Folks, this is a fucking fantastic interview. Rushkoff came over to my place in New York in early August. We sat down for a couple hours and we talked about what it means to be human in a world that's becoming increasingly anti-human, including why Western civilization is in a roid rage moment and what it means for the potential collapse of our entire society, when the human story went from being circular to linear, and what this meant to the identity of each human being, and why Rushkoff isn't optimistic about technology's ability to solve technology's problems. This is a great one. I can't wait for you to really get into it. So without further ado, I bring you Douglas Rushkoff.
If you can't be progressive anymore because progressing means that what you did 10 years ago is no longer good and now you're out of the club, then who's going to want to progress?
Well, then you just wrote about this on Medium, right?
Yeah, circular firing squad of the left.
It is.
Yeah, it bothers me.
Yeah. Why? What does that mean? Like, explain that a little bit.
There's I get that we don't like old lefty politicians anymore, right? Because they're old and we're young and we want the next, we want AOC or whatever. And that's great. But the forefathers of the progressive movement, they're the people who fought for civil rights and did all this stuff in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And if you're going to yell at somebody for something they said in 1980 that was progressive at the time, but now because of the language is considered insensitive to what we currently understand, that's a big problem. It's like, okay, so someone called black people colored in 1980 when there was the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People was the organization. It's like, you can't yell at somebody for that. It's like, the question is not where were they 30, 40 years ago? It's where have they come? What did they learn? If you can't let people change and develop, then you don't want living humans in your world. And the thing is, I guess what I'm looking at these days is that, fascism rubs both ways. Fascism is not the particular content of the fascist side. Fascism is also the unforgiving, absolutist approach to everything.
The statist approach to some degree.
Yeah.
Just assuming things will stay as they are.
Yeah, and just being this kind of extremism is I get it. We see, racist fascists on the one side and then become, anti-fascist fascists on the other side. And you can't. And that gives the neo-right so much ammunition. When I'm in a faculty meeting at CUNY and another faculty member says, well, you can say that because you're a cis white male. It's like, I'm getting it from that side. And at the same time, there's people marching in South Carolina saying the Jews will not replace us. So to him, I'm not white.
Right.
So it's like, okay, everyone, just all you all can hate me.
Yeah. You can't win. You can't win in this environment.
I get it. I could pass for white in many situations or be treated as white in a store that might follow me if they thought I was black because they're scared I'm going to shoplift. right? So I get it. I'm not going to get that. But I can go to the South and also stand out like a sore thumb in certain situations and be like, the questions I'll get asked as a Jew are just incredible. So it's funny.
So extremism has been developing.
Yeah, this is an interesting moment.
Of significance, right?
I know. It's an interesting moment in culture, right? I mean, it feels like there's a right-wing insurgency in America that if it kept going on the same trajectory, we're going to go to civil war, right? It's going to get increasingly violent. When you do I've got a friend at the Anti-Defamation League who does a memetics project using my old stuff, my old media virus looks and stuff, but really mathematically and with computers and stuff. And they're looking at the frequency of certain kinds of hate speech and how it corresponds to hate crimes. And it doesn't look like a good trajectory unless something significant changes.
People like Steven Pinker, who say that life is getting better all the time and that, the Western world is improving. So it seems like there are a lot of these arguments and counter arguments and people saying, well, look, like there's something to be grateful for and, this is beautiful. You have everything at your fingertips. At the same time, we look outside and there's another mass shooting happening and there's an ecological crisis underway and there, it seems to be very paradoxical.
Well, it is and it's not. If you look at all the externalities of human technological scientific progress, all of a sudden it stops looking like progress. So Pinker is talking as if, let's say you're feeling weak and you start taking steroids. You're going to be stronger and you're going to lift more today than you did yesterday and more tomorrow than you did today. And by all those metrics, you can say, look, things are getting better. I'm awake more. I sleep less. I've got more muscle mass. I've got less fat. I'm lifting more stuff. I'm running faster. Yeah, but you're also closer to catastrophe. To death. This is not, what did you have to do to your liver and kidneys and brain and spouse in order to become a roid raging maniac? So, right, Western civilization is in a roid rage moment. And you can look at certain metrics have improved, but so many other ones have gotten worse. We're on a planet that can't support this rate of extraction. And what he's talking about, and let's play the real game here, right? So I've got the same agent as he does, John Brockman, agent to the scientific stars. And these folks, when I go to their when I would in the 90s, go to kind of dinner parties and all.
You don't go to the dinner parties anymore.
No, I would. I'm not invited anymore. I was a promising young whatever. But, and I was at the dinner, and they would basically accuse me of being a moralist, of being kind of a superstitious sort of, even if I don't believe in God, I believe in a moral order, moral fabric to the universe, which is God by any other name, that makes me weird, superstitious, retrograde, like I'm never going to amount to anything because I don't accept the cool, rational, amoral logic of the universe. And now we're finding out that these same scientists were flying down to Epstein's Island, right? Hanging out with him, doing God knows what. And it's like, oh, okay, I get it. That's amorality for you. That's if you have no moral core, then that's where you're gonna end up. But they're taking an understanding of science that was forged in the late Middle Ages, early Renaissance by Francis Bacon. And Francis Bacon saw light and science as a way of getting rid of the dark, feminine, scary kind of stuff.
The mystery.
To get rid of the mystery. And even the language he used, I'm not just accusing him, the language he used was that through science, we would be able to seize nature by the hair, hold her down and subdue her to our will. So he's using a rape fantasy to understand, to express the purpose of science, to take apart nature and to all of its cause and effect components and to lose the in vivo holism of what nature really is. And
To atomize it, to mechanize it, to industrialize it.
That's why it dovetailed so well with, corporate capitalism and the industrial age and repeatability and Taylorism and, domination of workers and women. And the thing that you're doing, the thing that we're doing now is saying, oh, wait a minute, it's time to retrieve the human values, the natural values, the female values, the indigenous values that we forcibly repressed in order to build this scientific mechanized, technologized horror show that we're living in.
It's a Frankenstein. That was created.
She got it, Of course, it was the woman writing at the time who got it, but yeah, and some crazy romantic poets on absinthe,
And opium, right?
And opium, yeah. But, sometimes it's the drugged cultures who are able to hold themselves back from falling into whatever the dominant groupthink is of that time.
So then when psychedelics came about in the 60s, the 50s and 60s for the first time, what did that sort of reintroduction of altered states do to this mechanized industrial approach that we had been taking for hundreds of years by that point?
Well, it's weird. It led to the challenging of underlying assumptions. So, after Wasson exposed Leary to, I guess it was mushrooms originally, down in Mexico, he comes back and he's changed and he's looking at, what am I taking for granted here? That's sort of the main psychedelic insight, that I'm in a reality tunnel that has some underlying accepted suppositions which may or may not be true. So he goes back to Berkeley and he's supposed to be doing, I don't know whether it was his dissertation or it might have been, or his first work as a research psychiatrist. And he decided, how do we know that psychiatry even makes people better? So he did this experiment where he looked at the self-reported rate of cure of depressed people by comparing people who were on the wait list for Berkeley's free clinic and people who made it through got through the wait list and got the therapy. And who was on, so in other words, some people are on the wait list for 3 years, some people do therapy for 3 years. And the rate of improvement was the same, right? Which got him kicked out. I mean, he got kicked out of Berkeley for that, but then Harvard took him because they're like, oh, you're a smart guy, and that worked until, of course, he was caught, doing drug
dosing undergrads.
Yeah, well, or the grads even, I think.
There's that whole Andrew Weil, Timothy Leary, Richard Alpert thing.
Yeah, it was an interesting crew. I mean, and they were doing real research and real work, but and I think that actually getting kicked out of Harvard is what radicalized him. He wouldn't have had to be at Millbrook with a bunch of hippies and stuff if he was allowed to keep doing it as research. And it's funny, it's like now, finally, we're picked up where Leary's late 60s research at Harvard let off. It's like now there's disciplined studies being done about addiction and depression and everything else.
The resurgence of psychedelics.
The resurgence, right. So just as, but it's all about retrieval. That's the thing people don't realize. Progress is not about blank slate. That the Silicon Valley understanding of innovation and progress is that you come up with something completely new. Whereas the intelligent and more indigenous understanding of innovation is you retrieve something really old. My grandmother used to do this, or, the indigenous people of this region used to do that. So when we're looking at things like crop rotation and soil management, it's like, we can go to Monsanto for some patentable new solution to growing crops on dead dirt. Or, we could retrieve the techniques we learned for how do you steward soil, how do you engage with the living earth.
Well, and the difference between those two, I think, comes back to what you were mentioning earlier, which is externalities.
Yeah.
The wisdom traditions, these traditions that have been carried on for sometimes thousands and thousands of years, the reason that's been the case is because in some degree it minimizes these second and third order consequences that we just don't have the awareness to understand. Whereas, Taleb, Anti-Fragile and Black Swan, he calls this the Lindy effect, which essentially he knows if he's going to read a book that it's more likely that he'll read it if it's been around for 500 years compared to 5 months, because the fact that it's still around after 500 years shows that book has a lot of wisdom and tradition and understanding in it. So
and a lot of kids today would say the opposite. The fact that it's been around 5,000 years and nothing changed, means that we need a new solution. We need something else. Yet when you look at, a lot of my, fiction goes into the Bible or into Torah because there's such stuff in there. It's so rich. It's funny, like a friend of mine, Grant Morrison, this comic book guy, always looks back to like early Superman and early Batman. That's like his kind of source material to play with these giant archetypes. And for me, I go back, to Bible, but in some ways it's the same sort of pantheon of gods and matriarchs and characters going through these very mythic situations that happen again.
The hero's journey.
Yeah.
I think this is what the work of Joseph Campbell then did to popularize like what it meant to be human and what it meant to be human over, thousands and thousands of years, and how the human story is something that we all share, that we all have in common, that makes us really not that different from one another.
Yeah. And part of what I'm looking at is when did the story go from being circular to being linear? So like with the invention of text, and the Jews started to write down Torah. And the invention of text is what gave us history, because we could write down what happened. Mm-hmm. And it gave us a future, because we could have contracts and agreements that could be, that would project into the future. Mm-hmm. So once we had a past, present, and future, all our understandings of life and the world changed. The beauty of it is that the Jews kind of invented progress with linear time. We can be better next year than we were this year. Next year in Jerusalem, the Messianic Moshiach will come in the future. Let's work towards that, which is a beautiful thing. The problem with it, though, is it led to this kind of understanding of the past as almost kind of a dumping ground. It's like progress becomes, like for the billionaires today, how can I build a car that goes fast enough so I never have to breathe my own exhaust? So there's this kind of pattern. Just keep going, keep going. The future is all that matters. Everything's new. Everything's, renovated. And we move slowly west, until you get to California, where it's all still about forget the past, but move to the future. Don't worry about, the reparations and black people and all the stuff that you've stepped on. It's still...
Don't worry about the karmic debt that you've created over 300 years of industrialization and that you now have to face and come to terms with in order to actually...
We're going to come up with something new.
Heal, yeah.
New. Yeah. It's okay. Monsanto will get us out. The only way out is through. And I would agree that we can't go back, but the way we go forward is by retrieving and bringing forward. We draw forward from the past rather than just trying to go blindly ahead. But business and advertising didn't help with that either. We're taught to look at our parents. This is not your father's, automobile. It's not your father's Judaism. It's not, you're doing it new. Don't worry. It's like, there's some comfort in where we came from, especially when you look forward. If all people can imagine looking forward is the fucking zombie apocalypse, then maybe we should retrieve something else.
And in your study and your work, what examples have you found of that? Of people who are doing this, of organizations who are going back to that, of societies that are really trying to, retrieve the past, so to say, to bring it here and now to help humanity.
Well, interestingly enough, your microdosing community is sort of that. Let's take an ancient technology and bring it forward in a way that white Western people can understand. And sort of like when Maharishi, got imported to America by the Beatles, and he looks and goes, okay, how can I set up meditation in a way that these people will do it? So 2 30-minute sessions a day, give them a single mantra that's tied to their birthday so that, we have all the mantras end up being done in relatively equal distribution so that the kind of meta mantra will still happen on a planetary level, and they'll start to see the changes in their lives and slowly then discover yoga and proper action and all this other stuff, And, they're not all going to turn into David Lynch, but, they'll all be improved. Similarly, here's, the ancient the ancient rituals and technologies of, being able to identify psychoactive substances and do them in a ritualized context and all. It's funny. I originally, first when I looked at microdosing, I kind of poo-pooed it because it wasn't enough of a retrieval. It's like, I don't want people to just use psychedelic chemicals as ways of optimizing their productivity. That it's sort of like, Prozac or Lexapro or something, that it's just like...
It's a buffer against the poisonous toxicity of modern culture.
Yeah, which is an important thing. But having tried it, I can say that, right, well, it's not psychedelic in the traditional sense, but it's medicinal. It's in the mix. It's even if it's not a gateway for genuine tripping for these people. It's funny. For me, it not being a gateway would be the good thing. If someone said, "Oh, that's a gateway to stronger things," oh, good. It's like, and I'm like, well, shucks. Even if it's not a gateway for all people to full-on psychedelic experiences, I do think it could help people be a little bit more porous and contemplative, and help people establish rapport that they can't right now. I often talk about
help people to trust a little bit more.
Yeah.
Feel safe, a little more secure, feel a little more grounded, a little bit more in
to discover
their
eye
presence.
contact and things like that.
Yeah.
And that I've really seen with a lot of people. And in a way that's less, and nothing against any drug that people take, but it seems to be a little bit less jittery and brittle than the SSRIs that people take in order to get some of the same effects. It just seems a little broader spectrum and
more holistic, and well, I mean, even the research that they've done then and showed like what's the difference between SSRIs and psychedelics. Oftentimes, SSRIs numb us to what we're going through and what we're experiencing, so they create this sort of film between us and reality.
Uh-huh.
Whereas what microdosing does is, from my understanding, it just allows you to like go a little bit deeper into the mystery of reality. It allows you to tap into understandings that you wouldn't normally be aware of or have the ability to see.
right.
Because you're just a little more open, you're a little more receptive. It is in some ways, at least looking at from like a archetypal masculine feminine perspective, it's helping men in particular, from what I've seen, like integrate a little bit more femininity, and presence and softness and emotionality.
And it's funny, and that's why you're first talking about the earlier psychedelics revival. I mean, what happened? We were in that kind of Eisenhower stiff 1950s, 60s world. It wasn't black and white, but it was early Cold War polarized confusion, and men in suits and women in the home, and there was a lot of social control going on, really, since FDR's time.
There needed to be, right, for the World War and for all the stuff that was going on in the Great Depression. And
the social control they started to do when veterans came back from World War II, because they knew these guys would be all traumatized. So they built Levittown and communities for these folks, and they were really concerned, and so they kept everything kind of in line. And then we needed at that point, in the heat of the Cold War and early American kind of mass production stuff, we kind of needed something to break that open. And that's why, I looked at these things as medicines. They brought medicine to help, break through that. And we got, peace movement, civil rights movement, environmentalist movement, feminist movement. I don't want to say it was all caused by psychedelics, but it all went hand in hand with the medicines that were being taken to help loosen people's understanding of reality. And it helps sort of break down some of the ideologies that had really replaced everything. We were living for ideologies. And then, now that we're in the height of another kind of industrial age, this, silicon computer chip programmed reality where people really want to be machines, where we want to auto-tune the human voice to fit the quantized notes rather than hearing the human being reaching for the note. You know, it's like everything human is considered noise. What I'm saying and what I think psychedelics say is no, that stuff's the signal. You know, that's the stuff. It's all the liminal. Everything in between the ticks of the clock is where your life actually happens.
Back to the mystery and back to the unknown and back to the awe and back to the things that we can't quite quantify. Because then when you quantify them, when you all make everything tangible,
you ground it, you lose the life. You know, basically it's like turning biology into chemistry, you know, or chemistry into physics. You lose the paradox. You know, life is a paradox. Life is fighting entropy. Why? You know, and when you treat life as just the atoms, you lose what I think is actually animating this whole experience,
which is God or source
or soul or something.
Soul or something beyond our cognitive capacity and understanding of.
Well, maybe. I don't know if it's beyond the early scientific method, you know, to explain. You know, it's not something you can do in vitro. It's not something that you can break down into repeatable causes and effects. You know, it's when Francis Bacon says that science is going to subjugate nature, what are you subjugating? You know, it's wrestling her to the ground so she can be controlled. But then what would she have done if you hadn't controlled her? You know, where was she thinking? You know, and that's the part that they're trying to pretend doesn't exist.
And that's the part that's now coming back to fight us, right?
Between psychedelics, with Jim Lovelock and the Gaia hypothesis, and, you know, whether it's, you know, the Bohm and the implicate order, you know, a lot of people even see it in a kind of in a new science without even going as far as Rupert Sheldrake. You know, you can still, you see it. And these folks are they're not shy about admitting not anymore. They're some of the psychedelic origins of what they did, from, you know, Ralph Abraham, the mathematician, and there's a ton.
Buckminster Fuller is another one.
Yeah. Yeah, and all the stuff that went on with Willis Harman at Stanford, Stanford Research Institute, or these were all you know, psychedelics influenced visions. It goes beyond that, is the thing. It's not that psychedelics they're not the subject either. You know, they're just another tool, another medicine for, you know, breaking certain things down. You know, it's just that people they'll do coffee or sugar or alcohol without a thought. You know, something that's much healthier to look at. Oh, got to be careful with that. And in some ways you do have to be careful with it because, you know, these are powerful experiences, especially if you're going to drink a bowl of ayahuasca or something, you know, that's big, or, you know, do your DMT. But the kinds of simple mushrooms that, you know, cavemen and whatever, we're not supposed to call them cavemen anymore. That's another
Paleolithic
ancestors. Yeah, but just walk around and eat, you know, now is a whole big thing. Yeah. We don't have a balanced diet.
Nowadays.
Yeah.
We haven't had a balanced diet for many years.
Yeah. Since probably almost since we went sedentary.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and this is one of the fascinating things to me about psychedelics is it again gets to this bifurcation that's developing between team human and the more AI data-driven, you know, futuristic approach. And it seems like the more that we can maintain relationships with things from our like deep evolutionary history, these things that have made us human over the past 50 to 100,000 to 150,000 years, the more we can carry that ancient wisdom and tradition with us as we face this what will be a really sort of chaotic period that we're coming to. And psychedelics, from my perspective, are sort of the cherry on top. You have diet, you have sleep, you have fitness, you have sort of these physical things that are great to pay attention to based on this ancient lineage and wisdom. But then psychedelics, they sort of cross that whole, they're physical, they're emotional, they're mental, they're also spiritual. They really dial into all of the humanness that we have within us.
Yeah, it's funny. Even sleep, you know, it's like, I feel like people have surrendered their sleep to like Netflix. Someone's like, okay, you guys, you dream for me. And they don't get enough REM. They don't get enough anything. You know, they're sleeping 6-7 hours. tops, and you kind of need 8. I guess unless you do some Tim Ferriss thing, then you're allowed to optimize it. God bless. Do what you can.
Sleep for 20 minutes every 2 hours or something.
Yeah, I'm sure there's ways you can hack that thing as long as you get your REM. But yeah, we don't get sleep, and we don't get eye contact. We don't get rapport with other people. We have our conversations on Skype or on smartphones, and when we're with each other, we're not making eye contact. We're on our devices and multitasking, and we end up incapable of bonding with other people. If you don't make eye contact, the mirror neurons don't flash. You don't see if the pupil's getting bigger or smaller. The oxytocin doesn't go through the blood, and you don't get bonding. You just get distrust after every interaction. So how are we going to forge the solidarity we need to confront our problems if we don't have the basic ability to establish rapport with other people? So, the extent to which, a different diet or different chemicals and different plants are going to engender, the trust and patience to do that. It's what we need. I teach at CUNY now, and every semester I have more students coming up with a note in the first day of class. Please excuse Johnny from class participation and group projects. Has social anxiety.
And he just can't handle it, can't deal with it.
Yeah. And I look at that and I think, well, what happened to this kid, K through 12? They was probably sitting on an iPad and doing solo exercises. They didn't treat the classroom as this sacred space for young people to interact with the teacher. The teachers are probably scared of them or whatever. And that's a problem. Basic social skills are kind of
necessary, we can say. And these are the things that even like I wasn't taught. These are the things that I had to learn on my own. When you're growing up in middle school and high school, it's not like you're taking classes on connection, and it's math, it's science.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that in our current educational system are just not communicated well and understood well. It's very much within that industrious, still our educational system is very much a product of the early 20th century.
Yeah, and then the mid. I mean, it was when the Russians launched Sputnik, the American education system went, oh shit. And that's when they added calculus and all the science and, so that we could compete. And in some ways it was a good thing. I mean, for at least a while, we owned kind of computer technology and all that stuff and, the game and entertainment industries. But now we're falling behind, and I don't just think it's because we're not teaching enough STEM in our high schools. I think it's because we're so depressed and mentally ill and incapable of collaborating and have no values and things like that.
And how did we get to this point? Like, what led to this, from your perspective, what led to this mess, this sort of existential crisis that we're now going through as a Western culture?
I think it's mainly that we discovered that people, the more you individuate people, the more stuff they buy.
This is like Edward Bernays and the manipulation of modern marketing to create insecurity so we can sell people more shit.
Right. And it was based on an economic model that requires growth. So if you have, if on your block chips in and buys 1 or 2 lawnmowers that everybody uses, that's great for the people and their friends and they're sharing. It's good for the environment, but it's bad for the lawnmower company. Lawnmower company needs to sell more lawnmowers this year than last year. How are they going to do that? By making sure people don't borrow each other's lawnmowers. So we have an economy that requires desocialization in order to grow. Everyone needs their own TV, their own this, their own that. Everyone needs to spend as much time alone as possible. And that's not a recipe for a successful culture.
And this has been going on how long? I mean, would you
Depends
say
who you
the
talk
20th
to.
century? Would you say it's
Yeah.
been going on since the advent of industrialization?
Yeah, I mean, Robert Putnam wrote a book called Bowling Alone, and he said, that we kind of reached a peak of civic organizations in the early 1900s, like Kiwanis and Elks and, all those Rotary clubs and things and Boy Scouts and all that stuff happened. And then after World War II, it just started to diminish. So it was kind of the advent of television and advertising.
Which is what a lot of your work is focused on, right?
Yeah.
The role of mass media and And that's really what you've built your career on, has been the critique of media
I guess
and mass
so.
media.
Yeah,
And
I mean, for a couple of years, like for 91, 92, it was about the excitement of the possibility of this internet-y interactive stuff to kind of reverse those decades of mass media manipulation. And then around 1994, I kind of went, look, we're going in a wrong direction here. You know, if we leave Mondo 2000 behind and let Wired be our stewards for the digital revolution, it's going to go bad. You know, we're going to end up, you know, it's going to be about business and the long boom and, you know, selling more things to more people rather than connecting civilization and being the neural realization of the Gaia hypothesis, you know, which sounds a little incredible and Pollyannish, but I still think that's the role of these technologies. That's the role of media, is to connect us. When it connects us, it's doing a great job. When it disconnects us, it's working against, you know, what I think is the human and nature's agenda.
is there anything that can be done? Like from your perspective, are you optimistic about the future in a way? Are you optimistic about things like blockchain and, you know, these sort of new, quote unquote, new emerging technologies that are supposedly going to like overcome all the downsides of the internet that has been the case? Or there's just going to be more sort of second and third order consequences that we just don't anticipate and see?
Well, I'm not optimistic about technology's ability to solve technology's problems. You know, I don't know that another layer is going to help. That said, I mean, there's good people doing good things. You know, Art Brock and his holochain, you know, is a kind of a decentralized blockchain idea, which is kind of more true to some of those original nature-based visions of networking technology. There's folks, you know, when I sit with a Charles Eisenstein and other folks, I get a little happier. You know, I just went to this conference that he was at with all these like really rich people in banking and finance and stuff who really want to flip it, who want to do the right thing, and inviting indigenous peoples to come and figure out what the hell do we do now. And sometimes I think, oh, cool. You know, when they all say things like, well, yeah, we just have to make sure there's good return on this. And that's when I'm like, oh, maybe it's not going to quite work. Or when I look at the our climate situation, you know, I get concerned that unless, you know, Earth itself has a few trump cards that she hasn't played, which she probably does, you know, just they might not be pretty ones, you know, like rainforest diseases and, you know, ways to reduce, you know, human population. It looks kind of scary, you know. 2 degrees is not good. You know, there's already, you know, millions of people in India that have to leave where they are to get to places that aren't as hot. It's like the human body can't survive at certain temperatures. So I get not concerned for life on planet Earth, but I get concerned for, you know, that this civilization might have run its course.
And an AI will replace us?
Nah.
No.
I don't think they'll be able to keep AIs around without people. And they can't replace us. I mean, AIs can go do things, but I don't think they'll ever be aware of themselves. I don't think they'll be us. I don't think they'll have souls. But then that's non-logical religious talk. But yeah, that was the original, you know, the original inspiration for the whole Team Human thing I've been on, was this argument I got in with one of those singularity guys who was saying that humans should accept their inevitable extinction and replacement by, you know, our robot overlords. And I made an impassioned argument for humans, that we can embrace paradox and that we're, you know, that we're special. And he said, "Oh, Rushkoff, you just saying that because you're a human. Like it's hubris." And that's when I said, "Fine, I'm on team human, guilty, guilty." And if when the AIs are in power, they'll see my writing and know that, all right, I'm one of the ones they should kill, because I still think humans have this.
Well, hopefully it never gets to that, right? Hopefully the AI and the robots that come to be are
Our friends,
benevolent and
Yeah.
friendly, and there's a relationship there. And I think that's also something that came up for me when I was reading your work. It's like, what's the difference between the cyborgs that we currently have? So the Neil Harbison, Neil? He has that big antenna that comes out of the back of his head. He's given a couple TED Talks, and he speaks about that. He's kind of like this foremost cyborg that's going around and talking about how he now has this implant and he can like sense things with it and what that means for the future of humanity once we start basically grafting, pieces of machine into our skull, essentially is what he's done. But he still is very human or seems to be very human. So it's also, what's the distinction? Where's the difference between, what humanity consists of and what
I don't know. It's kind of like with drugs. I did all sorts of drugs, but I never injected anything. It was like somehow breaking the skin barrier sort of felt like, oh, that'd be pushing it. It's almost like your body and neurology calibrate themselves in extremely complex ways. I don't even mean complicated. I mean complex ways, like fractal complex ways, to time and light and other people. And I think that we interfere with those calibration mechanisms at our own peril. It's bad enough that we live in cities with grid patterns, that we have electric lights at night to keep, our pupils small or whatever when we're, so we can read, and televisions and, movies with flickering images that we put together with our minds. And I mean, they're beautiful things, but they're also challenging our basic coherence as organisms. If I have students who can't make eye contact, but they can look at Instagram, and then you look at, works of guys like Bill Softkeys, a guy I've had on my show who does a lot of work on neurochemical mechanisms for trust and peace of mind, and how easily they get thrown off kilter by screen experiences. Realize, wow, we're walking around in a decalibrated state. And the things that we could use to calibrate they're around. Nature helps calibrate. The ocean helps calibrate. Being with a person, breathing, forming rapport, fucking. I mean, there's a lot of ways that you kind of recalibrate your nervous system. And I get concerned about interfering even more than we already have. I don't even like having a cell phone around, just for I don't know what the little waves are doing to me.
Fucking up this is the thing. It's like if you hold it in your pocket too long, is it messing with your...
I know it messes with your sperms.
Your sexual potency. I was just talking with a friend yesterday. I'm like, at this point, I feel like I don't really have, free will or agency or autonomy. That there's an element of, because I'm on stuff like Instagram and Facebook and email, and I have a phone, that I've given up a lot of that agency and autonomy to these technological overlords that we now have, which is basically Apple, Facebook, Google, and Amazon.
Yep.
The big four.
Well, and then also, I mean, this is what I'm wrestling with. I live a life where my livelihood is dependent on producing thought at the rate of the net. So, so now I, write for Medium, and they kind of want me doing a piece a week, a little piece a week or a big piece every 2 weeks. And if I'm doing that and answering the email and doing my little Skype talks. And it's like, it has become my leash. And if it's not the technology itself, it's what comes, all the voices and things that come through it, and I'm wondering, gosh, if I just let all that go and just started just teaching my classes and doing theater, what would that be like? It's almost a utopian vision at this point. For me, and I guess partly it's because I feel I'm, it's just neurosis, or I'm operating at some deficit, or I owe something to everybody. I answer every email that comes in, and it's up, it's hundreds a day. And most of them are from people, can we just hop on the phone for 20 minutes and I can tell you about my blah, blah, blah. You give me some feedback, or so I could pick your brain about where to go and what to do. And I feel like an asshole if I don't try to make time for everybody. But then I'm looking at myself right now with this, sinus infection, exhaustion. I'm run ragged.
This has been going on for a while, because even when we were exchanging emails, like a month ago, I got the sense that you were tired and like
it's been going on like this for maybe 5 or 10 years. But in the last year or so, my stuff from like 10 years ago is finally like, oh, okay, he's not an asshole. He's right. I wrote this book, Life Inc. in 2006 or 7, saying the mortgage crisis was going to happen. The economy's not working. There's too much growth. Here's why it doesn't work. And, Wall Street Journal and everybody just ridiculed it, laughed at this guy's fucking conspiracy theorist, insane, or they're thinking I'm misreading Adam Smith. And it's like, they haven't read Adam Smith. Adam Smith was a moral philosopher. He was a fan of small business and little towns and anti-corporate. And he was one of us, not one of them. I mean, and they ridiculed that stuff. And now finally, it's like, now I'm invited to Bretton Woods, to talk to Larry Summers and Peter Thiel about where the economy went wrong. And now they finally see, oh, okay, which is great. But what that also means is I got hedge funds emailing me. People run hedge funds, like these kind of mutual funds for the rich and famous, and they invest in different things, emailing me saying, we want to create a sustainable hedge fund. Will you tell us what to do? And me, the sucker, I'll go and do the lunch and tell them what to do. And then they'll go make $1 zillion doing some, donut economics light, it's in like fake indigenous investing, or whatever. They'll do some watered down version of what I've told them and make $1 zillion. And it's like, and I feel I'm obligated to meet with them because I'm trying to convince them to do social good. And if I have access to this wealthy person, then of course I have to. But my own life is gone as a result. I'm just becoming this.
Do you feel like it's sacrificial to some degree, and there's purpose in that and meaning in that sacrifice? Or do you feel like it's all for naught? So to say that it just seems like wasted energy, that it's at this point hopeless, or whatever it might be.
I don't know. When you talk
or
to
both. For me, I'm like, sometimes I'm both. I'm like,
You talk to a healer, like, or someone who does Reiki and all that, and they don't get tired doing it. And their belief is if they do get like tired or exhausted doing it, it means they're not doing it right. Right? They're not Aikidoing the energy of it. They're taking on, if you're taking on all the poison energy, and then that's not the right way to be doing it. Or like a therapist, I'm sure they get tired, but they don't catch your neurosis when you talk to them. They've got some way. They don't, do so much countertransference that they go home crying. I couldn't do it, but so no, I think it means not that it's for naught, but I'm not doing it right. Or it's okay for me to say, I'm so glad you've discovered that you should take the time and read and read this book. If you really want to meet with me, you can hire me for, $10,000 a day, right? Some crazy thing, because they're billionaires. What am I going over having lunch with a billionaire, for him to become more of a billionaire? I fool myself into thinking, oh, they've seen the light. They're coming to me, because they want to. No, I go to these things. I went to my last one. I won't even name it, but these things like assemblage like things where they'll bring like 20 really wealthy people who've seen the light or had their first ayahuasca experience, bring them together with 5 or 10 of kind of you or me, and want to have an experience that will help them figure out how to heal the planet together. So they want to be the new leaders of humanity's return to wisdom. And they're hoping that some kind of an Esalen Omega Institute experience is the thing that will heal the planet, right? So they will go and they'll be like a Qigong master and an herbalist and special healing things and ringing of bells and all that great feel-good stuff. But it's like, sure, do that on your own time, or pay for that and get your sauna rub or whatever your thing and your ionizer and that. But then just join Extinction Rebellion. Join Sunrise. There's enough there. You're the leaders of the thing that fucked us up. There's new leaders now. Contribute to AOC, get the Green New Deal going. It's like, it's not a blockchain or a hedge fund that's going to fix this. It's all hands on deck shift in how we do what we do, and radical change is going to mean radical change. You can't just take all that money and then somehow shove it back in the system. You took too much to begin with. Mark Zuckerberg wants to give back 90% of his money or his stock. It's like, why didn't you, if you're going to do that, then why not just not have made Facebook into an extractive, horrible nightmare?
Incentives. Yeah. What are your incentives? What are your values? What drives you? Right. And this is where it gets into the plant medicine and the psychedelics. It's like, if done in a quote unquote proper context or ceremony or with elders or with, where there's a lineage involved, there's an element of these experiences can be rooted in like compassion and kindness and love for the other and love for community and love for the earth. But oftentimes when you just drop them in for some of these higher end people, then a lot of the old values still are there. They're just now figuring out how to work the system a lot better because they now have these tools that frankly are very insightful and useful, So it's almost like who's getting access to these, and is it actually going to change the world like we think it is? Like, that's one big thing that I worry about, because for me, it's like the work with psychedelics, it's like, it's kind of my last hope in a way,
It's not going to do it, unfortunately. It would have done it the last time. It's not going to do it because, I thought when I had psychedelic experience in college, anyone who has this going to be enlightened and fine. This is it. And that's why, Leary and Hitchcock, what was her name? Peggy Hitchcock something, got LSD to JFK. Figure, okay, he'll do it. And then once the president's done it, then the world can all be fine. But you could do psychedelics and still be a total asshole, and still, as we've seen, and still be a total womanizer, and still fall prey to the temptations of the flesh or the temptations of money. I would do, psychedelics and go to the parking lot of the Grateful Dead show and be with, a Burning Man level sense of community and support, and there's a new society here, and it's all good. But you could also go and see kids in the AC/DC parking lot doing LSD and smashing beer bottles and, screaming and smashing cars into each other. And I was like, wait a minute, they're on acid and they're doing this. So then that's when it goes back to Tim Leary, and it's your set and your setting. What are you bringing to it and where are you doing it? And if what you're bringing to it is young, hormonally, insane young male teen energy to it, you're going to have that experience. So it can't intrinsically change anything, but the work you're doing is interesting. I'm interested to see if low dose psychedelics give people a little bit more resilience. If it can kind of make people less brittle. So it gives them, it almost sounds like CBT, like cognitive behavioral therapy. What if it just gives them time to make a different choice in a particular situation?
To be more responsive than reactive.
Right. I mean, and that's what it would be. For me, it would be like, well, what if I, go to my computer in the morning, there's the 300 emails. What are other approaches I could take than, it's like Robert Anton Wilson would say, oh, Doug, you're in a reality tunnel where you are thinking that you owe every one of these people something, and that if you don't give them what you owe them, they're going to be mad at you. Why are you in that reality tunnel, Doug? Maybe you want to find...
Why are you in that reality tunnel, Doug?
Right. Well, why? Exactly. Well, I could play Freudian. I'd say, because I was with a mother who was emotionally needy, and I had to stay aware of her emotional state at any moment and give her what she wanted in order for her to nurture me the way I needed. So it's like, well, wait a minute. Those people are not your mother. They're something else. And they may be nice, they may not be nice, but even if they're nice, it doesn't mean that you owe them your time. I mean, I don't know. What do? You probably get more than I do at this point because you're known as the microdose guy. I'm sure the thousands of people who are thinking about microdosing all want to ask you their individual
Well, and that's why I built
question.
the course, right? So I'm like, if you want to learn about microdosing, we have these resources, we have this course. So it's almost like, what can be done to take knowledge and information, to build systems and processes around it, and then to deliver it in a way that people will learn from, and basically how can I not clone myself, because that's a little, but clone myself, take the knowledge and information, and in some ways you've done that.
You're not cloning yourself, you're cloning the data.
Right.
Right.
And I'm making it more accessible, and I'm making it so it's not dependent on my time and energy. So it's not
That's
just
why people used to write books. That was the whole point.
Exactly.
And my
you've written a lot
problem
of
is
books.
I write and I thought it would work like that. But what actually happens is people hear about a book and then email me for the question that they want answered so they don't have to read the book. I mean, in some ways, that's how I have a speaking career. Because nobody wants to read it, just give us the 30 minutes that apply to us. Curate what you're doing for us so we don't have to. So writing the books doesn't serve its original function of distributing my ideas to many different people at the same time. All it does is serves as an invitation for people to email me questions about something they don't want to read. Podcasts, on the other hand, people actually they'll take the hour and listen to it. Or these articles I write for Medium, 1,000, 2,000 words, they'll read that. So this book, Team Human sold, 20,000 copies. Maybe it sold another 20,000 audiobooks. The single little article I wrote that was kind of for the ideas of Team Human for Medium about these billionaires who, were building their bunkers and how that's this anti-human sentiment about the future, that it's gotten several million real reads. It's like, okay, so that's how you reach a couple of million people is with 1,000 or 2,000
shorter
words.
bits of information. Yeah.
Yeah. And locking myself up for a year to write a book that then comes out a year or two later is not maybe the cycle that I want to be on right now.
Instead, just but then in some ways you're giving in
to the digital
short form in a way. So you're being adapted to this maladaptive system. You're being adapted to this anti-human system.
Yeah, but there's ways to be human in there. In other words, the book is not the only form. But that's part of why I want to go do theater. Because theater, if I'm doing a play, doing a play is not an invitation for an email question. Doing a play, people accept that, oh, okay, that's something I have to go experience. So no one's going to write, oh, Manuel Lin Miranda, whatever. So tell me, how do you end the first act of Hamilton? Just go watch the fucking play.
Yeah, we're not going to tell you that shit.
You know what I mean?
That's not going to
happen. How do you end the act? You just watch it. It's people accept that. And people don't, because books have been so, books were sacraments to me. Books are experiences. Everybody writes books now, and they think of books as just 200 or 300 pages of information. It's not. A book is an experience. You go in the mouth of it. A book is an acid trip. A book, as I see it, a book is me taking your hand and walking you through the darkest fucking place I can, and then bringing you out.
And inspiring you to go change it. That's why I loved the last line of Team Human, which I won't share.
You can find the others. Find the others. It's they're out there. We're out there. Yeah, and that's why I like Team Human. Also, I like it as a last book because it's kind of a mic drop. It's not a book about something. It's a book that is this experience. Go through this and rediscover your humanity, the enemies to your humanity, and how to connect with other people, which is the only way really to retrieve humanity. Humans are a social phenomenon. We are a team sport. And that's sort of the thesis of the book, and that anything that keeps us from each other is the problem, is the enemy. So if you start evaluating the things in your life that way, what is bringing me together with others and what is just lumping me in an affinity group, that's not really connection. That's just branding or something. And then on these devices, are they really helping? Are they helping me connect? If they're helping me make an appointment to actually find a person, and that was the premise of Meetup was, and it's funny because Meetup, he came up with Meetup, Scott Hefferman.
And you're on the board of Meetup?
Or was. Now they're bought by WeWork, so it's kind of gone. But we lasted 10 or 15 years, and the idea came after I gave this talk at DisinfoCon. It was Disinformation had this convention in 1999 or 2000, and I gave the talk, Find the Others, which was originally a Leary quote, a way he responded to a girl who said, I had the acid trip. I've seen how everything's connected. What do I do now? And he said, find the others. So I gave that find the others kind of talk, that the point of the internet shouldn't be to engage with people online. It should be to find the others, and then you engage with them in real life. And he was like, oh, I can make a platform for that. So instead of people finding each other and staying in a Yahoo group, you find each other and then go meet in real life.
So you were the inspiration for meetup.com.
In part,
that talk. Oh, that's so cool. I didn't know that.
That's nice.
It's really cool.
Yeah, and he meant it. It was just hard to keep it going. It was a sustainable business, but not one that was going to grow into a multi-billion-dollar thing.
Well, and this is something that I've come back to. It's like, how do you measure this new form of wealth? Like going beyond financial wealth, but really like social wealth and community wealth, and how do we define social capital? How do we define ecological capital? Even those terms themselves are difficult because they're being fit into like an old paradigm and an old system. So how would you define social capital? How do we put more definitions around this concept of social well-being, even though the way that most people understand is, money in the bank and
once you find a metric for it, you're going to be reducing it to something icky. It has to be, certainly for any of us, meaning, Westerners with the ability to listen to podcasts, it has to be experiential, and that's scary for people too. But, moving more towards that kind of 360-degree understanding of wellness and connection, and, rather than this, the net really imposes a state of panic and desperation, and even just touching it, I always feel it's strange. I mean, I remember when that flipped, and that was back in the 90s when I used to get done with email and feel invigorated. Now email is just like this drain. Because, it's because we can't help it. We abuse it. People abuse it. The bias of email is to create greater access to you, And gosh, we all need work. We're all freelancers. We all need the opportunities. So email is so much about, does one of these have a job in it? Does one of these have an opportunity? And that's not fair either.
Trying to find the needle in the haystack, so to say. Yeah.
Yeah. Or is there going to be someone who has something that's really going to change my life? And is that going to come through email rather than from someone I just run into? And all the filtering that goes on between who gets through, versus there's something you could have learned from that person at the bus stop, that was in your normal path. That's the whole thing with technology. Even Kevin Kelly explains it pretty well. The technology gives us choices, more and more choices. And at a certain point, do you want to be making all those choices all the time? Choice can tend toward the more yang side of things, active choice versus kind of passive reception of what's coming through.
The more feminine.
Yeah, I mean, at least archetypally, yeah. So we'll see.
We'll see.
I mean, I know I'm not a microcosm for the planet, but sometimes I feel like it. Mm. There is something to be said for. I got in this argument with a team humany argument with an environmentalist, this young woman in Europe, who was telling me why should we protect the humans? The humans destroyed their Brazilian rainforest, which is basically the lungs of the planet, and maybe humans are the problem. And while she's talking to me, she's smoking these Gitan or whatever Galois cigarettes, and I'm like, look, maybe you should protect your own lungs before talking about the lungs of the planet. All is one in the great fractal of life. And
did she like that?
No. She thought I was, doing the thing. And I understand, calling out individual hypocrisy. So it's like, okay, I flew in a plane to Europe to talk about climate. Is that appropriate or not?
Right.
And it's like, no, it's not appropriate, but it's a compromise. Just smoking fucking cigarettes, though, as your entertainment, it's like that's not some necessary compromise to something. I think it may be just bad.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Maybe the way Native Americans did it, once a
ritually
week, sitting in a
with
thing.
As a medicine. It wasn't what the industrial world has now made cigarettes.
I don't think they were
these
chaining.
little addictive things to keep you distracted and numb to the emotional pain that you're actually going through, or whatever it might be.
And that's of course the danger that you hear about microdosing. Is it a way of taking, Earth Mother and divvying her out so that people can have the good without the change? But I would argue that hopefully not. Hopefully it's not just safer speed, but and from the evidence so far, it seems it's equipping people.
Well, and it is a lot about the educational process, right? That's for me the key thing that I'm always focused on is how do you teach? And a huge part of teaching and a huge part of learning is experiential. So it's one thing to read Michael Pollan's book and go, oh, psychedelics do this and psychedelics do that.
Right.
It's another thing to actually like, at least, especially for a first-time person who's in their 50s or 60s, who's never had a psychedelic experience before, to like surrender to that level of unknown when they have already so much stability and structure. So are they going to go do 6 grams of or 5 grams of dried psilocybin mushrooms in the dark and just jump right in off the bat? Probably not. You know, in some ways, they might be more likely to start with like a microdose and go, oh, okay, this is not near as chaotic and crazy as I thought it would be. Now maybe I can go a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper.
I wonder though, do we have actual evidence that older people with more formed egos and all whatever, that they have a rougher time with a major psychedelic experience than a young person? Because my subjective experience, I hadn't done psychedelics in a super long time. You haven't? Hadn't. And then did. And I was worried that, okay, after 10 whatever years or 15 years, I'm not doing this. This is going to be really rough or whatever.
Yeah.
And the thing I realized instead was that over the course of my life, having faced the real demons, you know, sitting with my mom as she died, my dad as she died, you know, a bunch of those things, car accidents and deep questionings about everything from my right to live and my sexuality and my quality and my marriage and bringing another life into the world. I've been in the darkest places that drop 5 hits of acid, and it's like, what are you going to show me that I haven't already stared in the dark maw? You know, that these, and maybe it's just having a good setting, but these chemicals aren't going to show me anything darker than I've already stared at. All they're going to do is give me the context to see where they came from and how they're going to bring them to me in a gentler, more loving, more holistic, full spectrum way than I already bring them to myself. You know what I mean? It's like I'm already in the bad trip here.
The pain of survival.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And seeing it, once you understand the I mean, it's almost like the old coyote legends. Once you understand the pain and suffering that you cause through every step that you take, what it means to eat, what it means to live, you know, it sometimes makes me wonder. But I guess it also has to be someone who moved through life a little bit consciously, that did stare in the face of those things and didn't just.
Well, I think a lot of us as humans have gone through that, and I think that point is very relevant. That people in their 50s and 60s, they've gone through these experiences. Most don't have the context that you do of understanding then that actually a psychedelic is not going to be any more difficult than some of these things that they've already faced in life.
Right.
There's this element of, because it's so stigmatized and because there's so much, you know, poor information out there, that they really genuinely believe that it is this terrible, or potentially, you know, like they're going to lose their religion as a result of it, or they're going to lose whatever X, Y, and Z might be as a result of it.
And that's because there were, you know, these acid casualties in the 60s.
Right.
Occasionally, you know, someone would jump
People
out
would jump out of a
something.
window.
Or Art Linkletter's daughter or something.
That was it.
That was the big story.
That was it.
Yeah.
Why'd you take so much time off of psychedelic? We haven't really talked about this at all. What's your relationship like with psychedelics? Like, how did they first come into your life? And then, you know, it sounds like recently you've re-explored a little bit.
In college, you know, I went to Princeton in the height of the New Republican era. You know, when
this was like early 80s.
Yeah. Early 80s when like Reagan.
Yeah.
You know, end of Reagan and
George H.W. and
yeah, like Iran-Contra kind of time.
Yeah.
And there was like 12 of us at Princeton who were radicalized by this awful thing that was going on in America. And
Which was the Reagan presidency or the Iran-Contra affair?
Both. It was Reagan.
All the things.
Yeah, this sort of yuppie scum. Everyone thought would just get rich. It was Gordon Gekko on Wall Street, and that was the new America. We won the Cold War, so all this people stuff is bullshit. Community and all is bad. Everyone just be a strident individual and get your money and go work for a bank. Everyone was graduating Princeton and going working for, Morgan Stanley. I'm like, geez, you just got educated. Why be a stockbroker? Right. You do anything. And so there were like 12 of us, and these guys lived in this house, and they called it the Fourth World Center, which is kind of a thing. And they would do these parties where each room would have a different, like, Brian Eno ambient playing in it, and they'd have drugs. They knew some guy at Columbia who was making acid called Golden Dolphins. And we would do that and have these, I remember I had my first trip was with Walter Kern, who's a novelist. And we just walked around the campus and saw the whole thing. And then went to the psychology library and found, which they had at the Princeton Psychology Library, they had Timothy Leary's Tibetan Book of the Dead, psychedelic manual, and read that. And there was just no mentors. There was no tutelage. All you could do, because we were a discontinuous little blob of 19-year-olds, discovering these substances and then using the books to find out what to do. So there's, True Hallucinations or what, Imaginary Landscape, I guess, was the McKenna book, and there was some of the early Leary stuff, and then just kind of wing it. And then that, the internet happened, which seemed to be and was early on the sort of physical manifestation of the psychedelic urge, of just growing this neural system, neural network, and connecting with other people and breaking down boundaries and having no such thing as secrets and privacy, and as a
open sourcing
everything.
Right,
which has turned into data mining, but it was a different kind of a thing. It was an experiment in intimacy. But yeah, it went all businessy. And then, I just didn't, kind of got the Alan Watts thing of, once you get the message, hang up the phone, and I didn't really see, after, I did some experiences with Leary before he died in the mid-90s. We were, because, by then I was you're a friend of Leary and going to all the parties. And
what was he like to hang out with him, to spend time with him?
He was sweet, but he was really hard to hang out with because he had a kind of a dominant personality. And so being with him was a little bit like being with a very particular kind of acid. It has its shape, and then you kind of have to conform to the shape or to the process that he's going through, which is kind of being in a certain kind of intellectual crucible, and it being in his ego space, which he had, and because he's a guy born in the late 20s or something. He was a different.
And he was a fucking legend. It's Timothy Leary,
right? So he had a kind of a rock star thing, and so his world was a little bit not cultish really, but controlled. So it was great, but also I didn't live there. I mean, some kids just like lived in the house or there all the time. I would dip in, do 2 days, and then come out because I was trying to sort of maintain maybe my own ego, but also my own journey. It was about I wanted to do my thing and not be
Timothy Leary's acolyte or
fanboy or something.
Fanboy or something like that.
But it was fun. We explored lots of things, and I put him in VR gear for the first time.
Really?
Which was fun. Yeah, there when he was first going on the World Wide Web. So those were early, heady, wonderful days. And then when he got sick, I was there to help with the really helping fund his death. So I got him a book deal with HarperCollins with my editor for a book called Design for Dying, which he didn't end up writing, but we got Are You Serious to write it at the end based on a lot of his stuff. And so I was kind of trying to help, almost be like almost a literary agent for him in some ways, just to bring cash into the house to support, the people trying to help him and him to get nitrous tanks and whatever he needed. Yeah. But no, he was a really interesting, positive, intellectual example, both in what he did right and in where he went maybe a little bit wrong, But after what he went through, being imprisoned and solitary confinement and all, and dark stuff, and then
escaped and went to Algeria and went to Afghanistan.
I mean, it's like for him to then get to LA and want to live in a nice house and be friends with movie stars is like, come on, man,
give him a break.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, let him live a little bit.
Yeah.
Enjoy it.
And the fact that he was always open to people's ideas and, he in some ways is a better listener than I am. People would just come to his house and they would ask him a question. He's like, I don't want to talk about me. What are you doing? Tell me, what do you think? Just to try to, I guess he would also dismiss people pretty quickly if they didn't have something. Sure. They weren't bringing something to the table, but he was just hungry for insights and had young people around all the time to know what's happening, what's new. But yeah, I liked as a person. I got a thing at 12:30. As a person, I liked Robert Anton Wilson. He was the one, when I met him, it was like there was just no pretense at all. He was just like, from the first minute I met him, it was like Uncle Bob.
And can you explain just for our listeners who Robert Anton Wilson is? Just a little bit, a little context.
He was a friend of Leary's, a little bit younger, I guess, and a 1960s Berkeley writer, thinker guy, big pot smoker, and he wrote for Playboy, but he was all into, like life extension and space migration and how's the human organism changing. He's the guy that came up with the phrase, reality tunnels that people live in. And he wrote these really bizarre conspiracy novels, like the Illuminatus trilogy. That's him. And he had a writing partner for a lot of that. But I knew him. And so he was like a scholar of James Joyce and a user of psychedelics and a thinker about how human beings are gonna change. And I did a reading for one of my first books, Siberia, up at Capitola Book Cafe near Santa Cruz. And he just showed up at the reading. A lot of people were there, like Ralph Abraham was there. I think Rudy Rucker was there, the whole Santa Cruz crowd. And here I am, this like, whatever, 29-year-old kid or something talking to my heroes. And he comes up after the reading is done. He says, you want to come over? Come over and have a beer or something. And we walk. He lives in this garden apartment around the corner from Capitola Book Cafe. And we just walk there, have a beer or tea or something. And it was the closest to when, I would do a reading in Miami or something and then go home with one of my great uncles who lives down there, go to their little condo and,
just hang out and he's like,
have a
family, like it felt like that. It felt like he was family.
Yeah. And the conversations we had were, it's almost hard to describe it. Rather than having a directly or immediately profound conversation about the fate of humanity and human evolution and the mind on psychedelics or the shape of ego, we would talk about totally mundane things, but with all of that behind it. It's kind of hard to describe. It's almost like a psychedelic conversation. It's like, how'd you get over? Oh, well, I flew to San Francisco and then I did one of the super shuttles, to get here. And it's just all the
it's like the metaphor that lays on top of
exactly.
The kind of existential depth underneath.
Exactly. What are you reading now? Yeah, I've been reading a Beckett novel I never read before. Really? Yeah, Beckett was Joyce's secretary for a while. So yeah. Then it's like, okay, what have we just done? we've just made a generational comparison between Joyce and Beckett and Robert Anton Wilson and me, of like it or mentor relationship or literary touchstones. And it was just, but with no performance. It's like, usually you meet one of your idols and it's like, you either feel compelled to perform for them to demonstrate that you're one of them, or
you're worth it. You're valid.
Or whatever.
You're to be taken serious.
Or
and
they're going to put you
respected.
through some paces or ask each other questions and all that. And it really was just so not like that all the time. And once in one of the later conversations, there was this DVD, and it was like a Robert Anton Wilson DVD, and I was on it. A bunch of people were on it, and he had seen it, and then I was seeing him. I forgot where, probably at his house, and he's like, we're having some conversation about something, and he's like, Doug, saw that DVD, and he's like, you really don't understand what my work is about at all, do you? But not in a way that, I got to know, like he's got to correct the record, but because you can't ever understand what someone else's work is really, really, really.
Well, especially Robert Anton Wilson's, because it does have that element of mystery that's woven throughout everything.
There's wink, wink, wink in it.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
And I was kind of saying, in the end, that his work is saying, believe nothing, believe everything. And he's saying no, that it's actually, that there is something particular that he believes.
And what was it?
I don't know. But what I got from it was like, when he says keep the lasagna flying, it's sort of like walk around as if it's all true. Because it may be. What's true, who knows? But he would say, I guess, that he's more involved in almost in an amazing Randy way of turning over every stone and trying to figure out, is this real or is this not? Are there people on Sirius signaling us, through something or not? Or where are that I kind of, on some level, threw up my hands to know, are the pyramids by aliens or not? I don't know. Maybe. And it doesn't, on a certain level, it doesn't matter. What's the difference between an ancient and an alien? To me, they're equivalent. They're as different from me as.
That's so fascinating that you got to spend time with.
Yeah, it's the one
people
good
like
thing to
that,
being older.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
I got to bridge, that's the beauty of Gen X. The real Gen X, or the Douglas Copeland and Rick Linklater, and is that we got to bridge the gap between those people and whatever it is now. So we were on the one hand, we were the first people who understood what digital was going to be, and we got to tell our elders like Leary and Wilson and those guys what was happening, so they could then give us the benefit of their pattern recognition. But now we're the last people who remember what life was like before this stuff.
Isn't that crazy?
It is.
That this entire generation that's being born was not born before the internet. I think I was born in 90. So it was probably 5 or 6 when I first started getting exposed to the internet.
Right.
And
that was sort of AOL discs and
dial-up and DSL. And, I was mostly playing at Oregon Trail and dying of rattlesnake bites.
But the internet was still, you would go online. Yeah. Online was not this state of being, which it is now. Or for a lot of people is now.
For most people it is. And it's what we're pushing more and more towards.
Yeah. It's weird. Like for me.
What you got to head out pretty soon?
Yeah, I got to go do a thing. Okay. I got to meet the last one of these people. I promised I would see her. Some millionaire who's got a hedge fund who says she wants to do fund for social good. They always want to do that until they find out what it would actually entail.
Right. Not infinite growth.
Yeah.
Not more money sometimes.
Yeah. Well, that's just charity.
Right.
That's not. They don't want to make 10, 15% back. Just some normal amount. Because they're worried. I understand. They're worried. Then you got to collect a lot of money because they live in a world where no one's going to take care of them when they're old. You got to pay for everything. Can you imagine if we, as a matter of course, expected the next generation just to take care of us because they would?
That's the tradition. That's the lineage. That's what's been
What you
taught.
do, you get old, you take grandma in the house and take care of her. If she didn't have to worry about retirement, and people wouldn't be. What other species tries to collect enough stuff before they get old so they can live out the rest of their life just eating that? Like a squirrel. It's like, oh, I'm getting kind of middle aged. I'm going to just fill this tree with nuts to the point where I can then live my last year or two just eating those nuts. You know, we pretend like the older people have nothing of value for us. So we just stick them of course, if they've got no value to produce for you, then you're going to stick them in a nursing home or someplace. You know, you got to realize that, you know, just go to Europe and go to Rome at night and see the everybody's out. The old ladies are just sitting there on the stoops, you know, watching out. And their presence means there's less molestation. There's, you know, someone to watch your kid at night so you can go make out with your wife over there by the fountain. It still is there. It's a different understanding of quality of life. But yeah, if older people are seen as integral to the community, then that also flips this economic thing on its head.
And I think that's a good place to end, because that for me is like, more than anything, what's so great about what's going on with psychedelics now is you still have some of the elders like Stanislav Grof. And Jim Fadiman is a friend and mentor of mine. You know, he was back in the 60s doing the stuff. It's, you know, Ralph Metzner recently passed away, but for many years he's been with us. So it's just, I think it's happening at the right time. It's coming back. And for me, that's what I'm, again, most inspired by more than anything is like, yes, what can psychedelics do to help this existential crisis that we're dealing with, which a symptom of is all these mental health issues and all the disconnection. But more importantly, how can psychedelics help to expand human potential in the vein of, you know, what Maslow spoke about with self-actualization and self-transcendence and maintaining that human integrity, I think is key to, you know, what Charles Eisenstein talks about is building this new story of humanity.
Right.
You know, and it's like, how do we give people the tools to feel like this matters to them, and then they can go out and actually give their gifts and contribute, turning people from consumers into contributors.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just listening to that first talk. Someone found it on cassette the talk that I gave at the Capitola Book Cafe.
Someone found it on cassette?
Yeah. And I was listening to it, and in it, I'm saying that, look, I don't think that people are afraid of technology. What they're afraid of is their own capacity to create reality. And because of technology has just made it more apparent, but we've actually been doing it all along.
Right.
You know, and when you see that, it's frightening, but it should also be tremendously empowering.
Both.
You know, we can do this differently. We can create a different reality for ourselves. We can interrogate the assumptions underlying the reality tunnel that we've pushed on the indigenous peoples of the world. You know, back off, get a little more fluid, and pick a different path.
Mm-hmm. Pick a different path, the human path.
Yeah, which a human connected, natural, feet on the earth, weird, wonderful celebration of the quirky nooks and crannies, you know, that make us so much more than robots.
Mm. Well, thank you, Doug. Thank you for joining me today and just sitting down and randomly coming over to an apartment with someone that you've never met and and just sharing all your wisdom. And thank you for all the work that you've done. And thank you for being who you are.
Well, thank you. I figured I owed it to you to come. I've been using all your materials for free without ever paying for the subscription. There's enough data free.
It's beautiful,
that you can pretty much
piece it together.
You really can.
Oh, you can,
with
yeah.
what you just on your site. Though.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what it's like. How can we make something great? And then for people who like
Really
want to
wanna
go a little
explore,
bit
yeah.
deeper, then we have that option. But
Yeah.
I think, and that to me should be that's the future of business. There's no reason to hold things back.
Yeah.
There's only a reason to get people to deeper engage.
Although you
engage
do
with
also have a donate link.
we do have a donate
Yeah,
link as well.
and I think
Yeah.
that was what I did for more of a like, well, I don't want to do the thing, but I've gotten value from this, so let me just PayPal $20 through the whatever that was.
the Patreon thing. I think,
Yeah,
for a while.
yeah, because then it's like, which is nice too. People can just
it's the gifting.
Yeah.
the gifting approach, the reciprocity that comes.
yeah,
with it, right?
I just wish we had our own token,
For psychedelics,
or for just nice people, nice
for
people
nice
token.
people. Yeah.
It's just not.
Maybe that's your next project.
nice
you know,
people token.
Maybe that's the next project that you're going to take on and going to work on.
love coin.
Exactly. Okay, before we leave, before we get off air, though, where can people find out more about your work and
Well,
all that
I
sort
do
of stuff?
I do a weekly podcast at teamhuman.fm.
Okay.
There's this great book and an audio book I wrote called Team Human. I think it's my last book. It's a short book with 100 little sections, and probably the best trailhead for people into what I do.
Teamhuman.fm, Douglas Rushkoff. It's really been an honor. Thank you.
Me too.